This is actually my least favorite part of these meetings because everybody's talking, the networking is so good, and I feel like I'm interrupting, so I feel bad. But that's the way we get to start every one of these. But welcome. Just real quick, how many folks with us for the first time? Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. We have a wonderful tradition around here. We normally start off with the national anthem, and our normal tradition is that our guest speakers will come up and sing the national anthem for us today. So in three-part harmony. No? All right. How about Janina? Will you come up and lead us instead? You had your chance for stardom. That's all I can say. There's a flag right there.
Good morning, everyone. You're going to have to help me this morning. My voice is a little sketchy from all the church work and Holy Week that's coming up for Easter and everything. But it is my tradition to ask all of you to join in singing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you all. Thank you. If we could, real quick, as always, opening, they show up here early. I mean, I get here about 6:15, and they've been here for a while working, making a wonderful breakfast, opening this place up for us and everything else. A big round of applause for our team and Mr. Barbecue. And they are having Armed Forces Week. I think they put some flyers out and everything about this, but the different services, benefits, food, barbecue. So check that out, but they are always wonderful hosts, and I just love their focus on those who serve us. So once again, thank you, Mission Barbecue, for all that you all do so much. And our wonderful partners. We actually have a few with us here today, so let me go through. AEW, we got a team here, 5 of you. Where are you? Everybody from AEW. Fantastic. I think you're probably our longest serving sponsor too, so you get the longevity award and everything as well as our appreciation. So thank you so much. Always. Nobody from Sawyer. Rick is not here representing Velocity. Ned, we got Ned with us today. Thank you, MCM Learning. Brian, I always dual hats. He's our video guy and he's a sponsor. So how cool is that? The one with all the hair right here. And we don't have anybody from Belfour or American Air. And then, of course, all of our partners down here. We did change the logo for the Lamparters now. They've been DDC3S'd, all right? So they're just Ron and Mary Lampard. I'm sorry, Mary and Mr. Lamparter.
Mr. Mary.
You're so confused, but thank you all. But even this week, I'll show you some pictures in a little bit, but the Michigan Defense Coalition, which is all the nonprofits, advocacy groups out there, AUSA, NDIA, WID, NOGM, we all actually get together. We do quarterly events that we host together, but the cool thing is that we cooperate, we communicate. We're not competitive at all. We know it's one team, one fight with all that. So I appreciate the teamwork and the synergies that come with all of that. The museum, Ed, back here, you're having, get the right, May 17th and 18th, okay? A salute to the World War II out at the Selfridge Air Museum out there. So if you want to participate, there are flyers on the tables. I know Ed has to run off here in a little bit, but if you have any questions, call him, look at him, find him, hunt him down. all right, as part of all this. But as always, trying to collect and preserve our heritage, especially for Selfridge, which I heard that was in the news this week. My team, our wonderful executive council. All right, I'm not even going to, everybody get your hands up here so I can not forget. Okay, we have Ray, we have Tim. Kim, you can raise your hand up here. You're always part of the team. Who else do we have with the executive committee? Am I missing? Oh, there we go, Carl and Brian. You're too close in front, all right? But these are the wonderful part of the team that make things happen here in Michigan. Your national award-winning Michigan AFA, not only a trophy for the best, but 3 years in a row, the fastest growing AFA in the nation. So that's all great stuff. Thank you for your help, everybody. I appreciate it. And we are truly a joint service. I already mentioned the wonderful partnership that we have with Ron and Mary and the wonderful support from there. And the Navy League, you actually heard her come up and sing the national anthem, and she's our ambassador at the door. She's Navy. So, I mean, we get along with the other services just well. Army, not so much. We'll talk about that. All right, elected officials and staff. I know I'm going to screw this up because I didn't mark everybody in here, but just hands up if you would, please. Awesome. Thank you for what you do. And oh, by the way, if you go back to that table, that's bipartisanship going on. There are R's and D's at the same damn table. You gotta like that. All right, we're ready to talk to my team. I want to just give an update. Last month, we talked about Starbase, the issues they were having. The CR actually did get resolved to a point where the DoD got money. They didn't completely fund it. That's not the right way to phrase it. Couple months, but they're able to open the doors. They have students back in there for now, and we're hoping for a long-term resolution. But just kind of an update is the doors are back open at this point. People are getting paychecks and everything. So we appreciate your continued support, and hopefully we can get this all resolved in the long run with the continuing resolution. Who knew that Congress was a little bit dysfunctional with this stuff? So yeehaw. But once again, if you haven't had a chance to go to Starbase, I'm waiting to see if this all works out okay. I intend to have one of these for a lunch in the summertime at Starbase again. For those who haven't been out there to see what they do for STEM education, primarily towards 5th grade kids, to get them interested in STEM and going that. What a wonderful place, from the space shuttle simulator to the robotics to the 3D printing, all the cool stuff they do out there. And one of our board members wearing dual hats with AEW and on the board, Steve, calling you out, buddy. There you go. All right, the good news. I know we talked about this last time, and you heard all my wonderful sarcastic comments about, we had a great trip down to the museum. We had a couple setbacks along the way. There have been no further reports of hepatitis from the weaponized hotel that we stayed at and all at this point. People on the trip know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm not going to get into all that again, but this is, as I told folks back at National, this is the stuff that gets me passionate. We had half the group were cadets from the Air Force ROTCs, and then we had a group of people. We got to go down to the Air Force Museum, spend a couple days, not just looking at all that, but all the stuff they have there. But they also had the micro drone racing competition that was going on at the time. So it was an action-packed weekend, and we got to meet Rockin' Richard Houston, our driver, who had been on the Gong Show and won. God, it was all wonderful. But as I mentioned, there's been a few activities lately. This is where we kind of work with these other organizations. I was blessed to have a all ROTC, so this Navy, Army, Air, ROTC awards banquet hosted by NDIA. We did this last week, where I got to be the guest speaker with all these wonderful young future leaders of the military. But I mean, what a great opportunity to be able to, one, just interact with them, but then two, give them some messages. And if you throw out 20 things and 2 or 3 of them hang in there, in the long run, you get no better opportunity than that. So it's just absolutely wonderful. And no, I did not take the sword out of the sheath when presenting that this time. That's an Army thing. And then, of course, this week we had the Michigan Defense Expo, once again hosted by NDIA. But we had a panel. It was all of us, the nonprofits, up there talking, and I am the least dressed of the group up there. Not wearing a tie, but that's all right. I combed my hair. All right, so news events. We have a designation since our last meeting. They used to call it NGAD, Next Generation Air Defense. Like most things in the military, it's mainly classified. President Trump announced a designation for that program now, which means something that was not with an unsure future, apparently has a future at this point, and called it the F-47. I personally keep thinking P-47 Thunderbolt World War II, but okay, it's the F-47, the next generation. And of course, no details. That's actually an artist's rendition complete with fog and everything else around there. But this program's been in existence for at least good 7 or 8 years. Different types of X-model prototypes flying with different parts and pieces of this airplane. But we have a new fighter that's going to be out there in the future. It actually has been, I won't say it's the definitive version flying, but it's been a very active program and will be more active going forward. As part of that, one of the terms, when you hear them talk about it, because it actually been part of the discussions with Selfridge, is a thing called the Collaborative Combat Aircraft, CCA. And the idea is we have unmanned, let's think of it as wingmen, that are going to be teamed with the F-35, with the F-22, with the NGAD. So when you have 1 or 2 planes, you're really going to end up having 5, 6, 7, however many different platforms out there with sensors, with weapons and everything. So just think of what that can be, all controlled then through that one, the NGAD airplane, or even from another source. If you think about the different potential that gives us, one plane now can act as a dozen did prior. So it's an interesting concept of that we're going to put these things up with our fighters, with our bombers, to be able to work with them. Not replace them, but it's going to be their loyal wingmen in an autonomous fashion. In the news, these are some of the innocuous things that happened. Actually, the first TPY, isn't it? TPY-4 radar delivered. The Air Force, of course, we want to know what's going on in the skies places. So we've had these TPS-75s. Am I saying them right? Yep. That we've had for a long time. The first of the new breed of radars has been accepted for service, not just tried, but basically the first one in operational service. We think it's kind of innocuous how it all works, but it's important that we know what's going on around us. But what I wanted to point out to everybody, this is where we get into the weird stuff inter-service. The United States Air Force cannot protect its own air bases. We are not statutorily, we're not in the business of air defense from the ground. That has been tasked to the Army. So when we look at Army-type systems that are out there, you've heard in the Middle East about THAAD, about Patriot, and some of these systems, and now we're hearing this talk of the charter for what we're calling Golden Dome, the Iron Dome, but for the whole United States. And some of the components of this are these systems. But when we look at what we spent from a defense perspective over the decades, that's the total number of batteries. So that's, 15 radars, 7 radars. How many places can those be in the world when we start talking about Korea, Guam, Europe, Middle East, and all of a sudden you realize we don't have many of these things, and none of them are deployed in the continental United States. But for your education, as you know, when we have air bases and we go overseas, who defends those air bases in the sky is the United States Army by statute. So it's an interesting dynamic that's at play. Just the same reason that the Army doesn't go out and buy fixed-wings aircraft to do close air support. That is, once again, doctrinally set to the United States Air Force. But for your awareness and everything. But my main talking points, you've heard me say it before, and I just want to make it my stomping. There's 3 things with our United States Air Force now, and if you want to hear more in depth, I'd be glad to get out charge graphs and everything and prove this all to you. The challenge our United States Air Force faces right now is we are the smallest Air Force since we were first designed in 1947. We are the oldest platforms. Most of the planes that are flown by the pilots are older than the pilots that fly them. That's the reality right now. We didn't buy fighter jets for over 25 years, and we wonder why we have a shortage. We wonder why there's not fighters to put in Selfridge. It's simply a numbers problem that we have. And the pilots fly less. We don't have the proficiency in everything that we've had in the past. We are at a crossroads right now of what's going to happen with our Air Force. Very capable, awesome platforms, wonderful men and women, but from a policy, from a defense infrastructure investment standpoint, we are at a very tough crossroads right now. Yes, ma'am. Talk closer.
Yes, thank you.
There, how about that? No, thank you. I appreciate the feedback. And at the same time, our primary adversary, as Secretary Kendall said, our previous Secretary of the Air Force, we have 3 priorities going forward in the future, and those are China, China, and China. Because they're going to be the big economic problem, they're going to be the big military problem, and everything that we're facing. Every single day, their Air Force gets bigger. Every single day, their Air Force gets newer. Every single day, they get more capable than they've ever been. And at the same time, we're looking at these handicaps going forward. What we've assumed in the past with their dominance and everything our Air Force does is no longer a thing that we can assume going forward. So the big foot stompers, especially for those in public service, please, oldest, smallest, least ready in history, we need to address this. We can help maybe do some of this out at Selfridge. All right, so it is my distinct pleasure now to bring up, now that we've talked a little bad smack about the Army, all right, a chance to bring up the Bruck family. If you haven't had a chance, this is Representative Bruck, his wife Natalie, and Anna, hiding back in the corner, I think, over there still. Thank you for coming here, talking with us today, but a distinguished career. I'm not even going to try and read the bio and everything else, but you were 31 plus years in service, enlisted, then over to warrant, a wide variety from active duty to reserve component, to public service, to running businesses. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that. But I had the wonderful chance to meet you. I was invited to come down and talk when there was a re-election launch or something like that down in Monroe, to come down and meet the wonderful family. And one of the people, I think it was Brian, came up with the idea, said, why don't you have them come up and talk about what happened in their lives and everything else. So I'm just going to turn it over to you at this point. Will, if you want to come up here. Representative William Bruck.
I just want to apologize before I start to you, because you might lose a couple sponsors because I was here speaking. So I just want to clear the air before, just so you know.
Okay.
Well, that's my family. As you can see, we have lots of kids. That was a few years ago. So it's a little older picture. I still have the dog and I still have all the kids. Plus one. Oh, is that? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there's only 8 there. Okay, we now have 9. So that is a really old picture. And our youngest is 5. So I did not give Odie a family photo, so he found one. That was my family photo growing up. So you can see me, I'm on the far left. And that's my father. He served in the Army down at Fort Hood for a few years during the Vietnam era. And my dad gave us some advice, some dadly advice growing up. He said, never become a tree trimmer and never join the Army. And I didn't become a tree trimmer. That's a good thing. I did become a lineman at one point and worked for the power company, but I'm the only one out of 8 kids that joined any of the services. I was a middle child, number 5 out of 8. That's me back in 1992 when I joined the Army. Uh-oh, okay, I thought it cut out. As you can see, I had a nice shaved head at that point. So I'm gonna try to give a real quick background on me and then flow into what I'm here for, I think. I've been trying to figure that out for a long time, what I'm actually here for. But 2001, I was in Egypt. So that's my platoon that I was with in Egypt, or part of the platoon. And we were there on the day September. We landed September 11th, 2001. We landed for Operation Bright Star. We were there for engineer support for Operation Bright Star, which is a multinational yearly event that occurred at Mubarak Military City in Egypt. And we had no clue what had happened here in the States. We went for almost 2 weeks not knowing what really happened in the US. It was quite a time back in 2001. Nobody had cell phones then. We actually didn't have any internet capability when we got there. We were there to set up everything for Operation Bright Star. We were the Advan party that was there to set up. So we really had nothing. We didn't have electricity. We're setting up the generators and setting up all the power grid, etc. So, and we got a Time magazine about 2 weeks after being there. And that's really where we started. Yeah, they used to have that magazine back then. But we actually learned about 9/11 from Time magazine. I mean, really, that's, when we started seeing what actually happened. And I recall, during that, seeing the photos of people jumping off the World Trade Towers. And I was a young buck sergeant that time, and I remember being furious and angry and actually crying, not because I was sad, but because I was so furious, and pounding the walls and the tables. And it was quite a thing. So life takes weird, odd turns, and that's really what I'm going to talk about today, I think. That obviously is a picture of, life is normal until something happens that makes it not. And during the Bush presidency, Bush II, his first presidency, that's the moment that he was told that America's under attack. And that changed not only his life, it changed our lives, and it certainly changed my life and set my life on a new trajectory. And that trajectory was leaving to go overseas. And so Anna doesn't want me to mention her name at all, just so you know, but this is a painting that she did. It's actually in the book that she wrote as well. But this is based off a picture of my oldest son, who's now 25, watching me leave on my first deployment to go to Iraq in 2003. So it captures, I guess, a lot of the what happens when somebody leaves to go overseas. I actually re-upped a couple days before 9/11 in order to go on the trip to Egypt, and so it changed my life dramatically. Just to kind of give you a flavor, I know there's a number of veterans here, but maybe you've never served, you don't know what we went through exactly, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but I'm going to show you kind of how we lived. So that's our shack. That was the end of 2004. That was the nice shack. And some of these pictures did get out of order. I should have reordered all of them, but that's us. As you can see, I'm down at the bottom. This is when we're getting mortared, and I'm eating my dinner. Like, I'm not going to let people interfere with my dinner. But I got to go to Babylon when I was there in 2003, which was pretty neat. That's at a base west of Baghdad, and yes, that's a gold-plated AK-47. It was Hussein's AK-47 prior to him being killed. That's a buddy of mine, and you say, why do we do what we do? That's Andy Eckert. He passed away 20 years ago. In 2005, he passed away in Iraq, but I served with him at the beginning, and he passed away Mother's Day 2005. That's him with some kids. This is just convoying in Iraq, kind of give you a flavor of what it looked like and what we were doing as engineers. In 2003, people don't understand, we train as we fight as we train, but as reservists, at that time I was a reservist in 2003, we went to Iraq with nothing. I mean, literally, when you compared the services at the beginning of the Iraq War, the difference between active duty and reserve status and the equipment was the difference of probably Kuwait and China right now, on their Air Force. They're not even close or comparable. We went there with equipment from Vietnam era. And so that's us convoying. We had no armored equipment, we had no armored anything, and we had all Gen 1, you name it. We had nothing that was advanced as reservists. So that's how we roll. Just some of the sites. As engineers, a lot of our duties were to remove things from the roads and things like that as well, so we did a lot of removal. That was my locker at the hotel there in Dogwood. I found a locker in one of the buildings, so I actually had a locker. I had a sweet gig set up. That was our bathrooms. So you can see we built, that's a shower. I don't have a picture of the bathrooms. We had a slit trench for our bathrooms, but that's us just chilling. It was very, very hot. Some of my buddies, I was at E6, that first deployment, and then we came home. In 2004, after 18 months, I came home, and the first thing I did after one day was tear down my house and rebuild a new house. So I'll talk about that shortly. But then in 2009, I went back again, this time as a warrant officer. So we had up armored MRAPs, which were quite nice. We called them bank vaults on wheels. So quite a difference. I got to meet General Fadel He was the Special Forces General for Iraq. I know he doesn't look much like a Special Forces general, but he was a BA dude. He was instrumental in stopping ISIS in 2014, just north of Baghdad. And then a few years ago, he died of a heart attack at 51. So it wasn't really a heart attack. But yeah, I got to do a special dinner with him because we did a big project for him, and they called in the middle of the night. Just kind of give you what the flow of how things work as an engineer. You have skills that nobody else has and everybody needs. So my skill set, as I said, I was a lineman and I was a warrant officer. I know electrical and grid, and I can make things work. I can make lights come on. And they had an issue with their hospital. They had been attacked, and then their power was out, and they were trying to do surgery. So General Fedau called my guys, called me, and I went over there, and we were able to get the hospital power back on. So he wanted to do something special. So he threw a big party for all my guys, which was really cool. So we got to see him, get pictures with him, get pictures with his Falcon that he had in his office or in his room there, and he fed us lamb and everything else. It was a great time. Some of the work that we do, some of the guys, that was a night convoy. Man, I looked good back then, didn't I, Natalie? We did some training missions with Iraqis. Then again, doing assessments on things that were destroyed. That was part of my job. When I came home, in 2004, when I came home, there was nothing. There were no parades, there was no welcome home, anything. It was, you come from 18 months overseas or deployed, and you spend 3 days at Fort Leonard Wood, and then they fly you home, and you come home and you wonder, what are you gonna do? In 2009, we actually had a nice little welcome home ceremony down in Toledo, Ohio, which was really nice. And then I went back again in 14. So, if you can click, as I click through these pictures, there's a whole lot of stuff I'm leaving out, but from 2003 on, every 4 to 5 years, I was deploying overseas. And that definitely adds a stressor to one's life, to one's career. I was a lineman at that time. And then in 2013, I started Visiting Angels, which is my business now. But in 2014, I went to Bagram, Afghanistan, and that's a picture of Bagram. Nice place. That's just me, being me. That was a buddy, another chief of mine that I still keep in contact with, and actually I was just texting him the other day. He's a great guy from Connecticut, National Guard. He was at Bagram. And then I got a welcome home party from Afghanistan at the airport.
Who is that?
That is Natalie. That is Vanna, and she's also going to pass out my cards too. So why don't you do that, honey, before I bring you up and you talk. So Vanna's going to pass out my cards. But so you get this. I'm coming home. I'm just waiting for the next time to go, because it's an assumption that you will go again, especially when you're an engineer and especially when you're a warrant officer. You're going to go again. And so when I came home in 2004, as I look back, I did a lot of weird things. When I came back in 2004, I no longer drove slow like a grandpa, as my wife says. I changed my habits. When I came home after being gone for 18 months, a day after I got back, I tore my house down and started rebuilding a new house. I tore off everything but the front section of our house. We had like a bungalow with a back section. I tore off the whole back section, including the bathroom and the kitchen. So if you can imagine being, my wife, which that'd be hard to imagine, I'm sorry. But I'm gone for 18 months. She has 2 littles that I left her with. I come back and I tear the whole house down, including her kitchen, and put a stove on the outside of the building, so she still has a stove. I ran a gas line out there so she could cook, right? The bathroom, you could see the stars. I took the roof off it, and for the next 2.5 months, I worked on building a new house, and then the day after I got the shingles on, I went back to work. That's how I made it through the stressors that I had experienced in Iraq. for the first year of the war. And so at the time I thought I was being normal. In my mind, I remember thinking this in my mind, like back in World War II, those guys came back and they just built stuff. I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna build stuff. So I came home and I just worked my tail off, not thinking of my family. So if you can imagine the stress that put on my wife, and I recall one time she was trying to help me too, like, God bless her, but she was trying to help me and she slipped or something, dropped something. I started screaming and yelling. That was the last time she helped me. So I was out there alone. I had a buddy of mine, I hired him for a couple weeks, and after a couple weeks, that's all he could handle of me, helping me, and he went back to PA. He was a college buddy of mine. And I was just an animal as I look back. And at no point in that time did anybody say, Will, what the blank is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Why are you doing? Nobody said a word to me regarding that. Now, Natalie, she probably wanted to say a few words to me, but she was a sweet, submissive wife, and and she didn't say anything. I probably scared her half to death. You know, I'm going through a lot of things. I'm going through nightmares. I'm waking up. I remember one night beating on Natalie and then me waking up and crying about it. Like, that was stuff that we were going through as a family. I never thought anything was wrong. Obviously not. I'm a man. There's nothing wrong with me. But I was putting an amazing amount of stressors on my family and my wife. And I didn't even know what was going on. So I bring it to this picture. After Afghanistan in 2014, I got back in 15, had a nice welcome home party, great tour. We got a lot of stuff done. It was crazy. Afghanistan was incredibly dark and crazy, but I came back in 15 thinking this is just going to be the same thing. I'm gonna get through what I went through again, and I'll be fine. But I wasn't. When I came back in 15, after about a couple of weeks, I was like, man, this is easy. This is great. This is great. And then my world began to fall apart. And I began to go through a lot of things that you would call PTSD. When I came back in 2004, it wasn't even a term that anybody threw around. When I came back in 2010, people were talking about PTSD, and I made fun of them. You know, I was that guy that would say, call people names for going to talk to somebody about their, psychiatric help. I was not very sympathetic at all. But when I came back from Afghanistan, I started to do a lot of things that certainly I shouldn't be married for anymore. Just the way I treated my family, the things that I was doing, the nights I was gone, the long extended periods of time. And Natalie did her best to try to, I'll say, corral me or, find out where I was, and she would make calls to other people trying to ask them if they knew, where William is, which when I'd find out, I would just get extremely angry. And I went through this very hard phase of being addicted to anger, if you will. And then every time I'd be home, so at that point in time, let's see, tour 1 we had 2 kids, tour 2 we had 5, tour 3 after Afghanistan we had 7 kids at home. And so I came home to 7 children, a wife. I was very conflicted inside, and everything that happened would make me scream. I would just explode on a daily basis. And I began to feel like a failure. Well, I was a failure, but I started to feel like a failure because I could not control my anger. I couldn't control my reactions. And so I would go home, something would happen. My child would trip, he would drop something, someone would yell, or just something would happen and I would lose it. And we had many holes in our wall to attest to this. It was not a good anger. Never did I abuse my wife or my kids physically, but certainly through my actions and my reactions, it was a mental abuse that I was putting onto my family. And so we went through that for a number of months, and every time I'd go home, I would fail. At least that's how I felt. I would fail. And Natalie would say, William, you need to make it right with so-and-so, with Zechariah or whichever kid I had yelled at. Or you need to get it right with me, or this, and I would. And then a moment later, I would fail again. So for me, it was easier not to be in that situation. So I naturally took myself out of that situation as much as I could, and I spent multiple nights upon nights at my office. Many times not doing work. It was my place to be alone. And so I spent a lot of time away from my family. And I talk about it pretty openly. If I'm too open, let me know. But, at the time, prior to going overseas, we grew up in a very conservative. I met my wife at Bible college. She's the daughter of a pastor out in Minnesota, and we had a very strong faith. We still do, but at that time, I'm thinking, I'm failing in every avenue of my life, whether it's with God, with my family, with others. And so I became very suicidal, and to the point where every day I woke up, that was going to be the day. And as I look back now, it was pretty crazy that, I would tell my wife, today's the day, don't expect me back. Things like the oddities that I did to her that she had to live with. In 2016, she said, you either need to get help or you need to essentially leave. And I know she didn't say it in the exact words, and I can't really remember exactly what she said, but I ended up going to the VA. I went to the VA, met with this lady for a while, and then they tried to give me drugs, and then I refused to take drugs, and then they said, well, because you're not following our protocol, we kind of have to take you out of the program. And at the time, I really didn't care. But that's how the VA dealt with me in 2016. But I went through about almost 2 years of that. Just thinking today's going to be the day. I'm going to end it today. And so now I have much more sympathy for people. And it really was my father passing away in 2017 that was the trigger in my mind. It wasn't ever any help from the VA or anyone I talked to, but when my father died in 2017, I spoke at his funeral, and I was really mad at my dad. I still am mad at my dad, but he kind of ate himself to death. That's what I call it. In a way, he committed suicide. In a way, he died when he was 70 years old, 35 grandkids, and he didn't care about life. And so, at that point, that was the last day I said I was going to kill myself, was the day I spoke at my dad's funeral, because I hated my dad so much for essentially killing himself that I said, I don't want my kids to hate me that way. So after that, I thought, I'm a lot better. But for the next few years, I still lived life pretty recklessly. And all I wanted to do was deploy again, honestly. So in 2020, I got my wish. I deployed after 5 years. I got back in 15, deployed in 2020, got to go to Iraq and Syria. That's a big water tower in Syria. I got to fly a flag on the water tower. Again, we got to, you guys know what that is, right? Yeah, nice living conditions. Probably you females won't know what that is. But those are, in the vernacular, piss tubes that we would have to use. And I got to have New Year's Eve with some French commandos in Syria. That was fun with them. And again, I got a welcome home when I got back. It was really, really fun. Got to surprise the kids at school. And that was great. But I wasn't fixed. As a matter of fact, when I was in Syria right after Christmas time in 2020, I was real excited about getting home soon, because it would be like 4 months and I'd be home. I was at that halfway point, or just over the halfway point, and I remember I was talking to Natalie about, how excited I am to be home. I'm going to be home soon. And she was going through a program through Little Blessings Veteran Outreach at the time, a year-long program that they do for veterans and veteran spouses. And she said this famous phrase, if you're going to come back the way you left, then you might want to rethink about coming home. We didn't talk for a couple weeks after that. That was pretty tough. I was stuck up in Syria, and at first I was very, very angry. As a matter of fact, I was extremely angry. I found out some things that, she had told her father that I was drinking, and I didn't like that. But and that was my coping mechanism. I think it's a lot of that's coping mechanism, right, Doug? But that's what I would do. And that was my escape, if you will. And she had told her father that violated my trust. And she said, I can't come home the way, it's the big D word right now. That was literally what I was thinking, screw this, I'm done. I'm coming home and I'm gonna do what I do. So after a couple weeks, we started talking again, and during that time, the van had broken. I didn't know that it had needed new transmission. She had talked to family or somebody else, got things fixed. There was a lot that happened in that 2 weeks before we started talking again. And I realized I am not a good man. I am not a good father. I am not a good... How can I be a great soldier? Which people would say, I was a Chief Warrant Officer for, God status, right, Doug? God status.
Right behind fighter pilots.
Right behind fighter pilots, yes. I was a great soldier. How can I be such a great soldier that people love and get all these awards and accolades and people respect you, whether it's generals down to the enlisted, they love warrant officers. But yet, I was still married, but I had no family. I was not a good man. And Natalie, when we started talking again, we started actually talking. And talking about what she was going through with little blessings. And then I came home, and then soon thereafter, we started talking, and I made a commitment. I stayed home for a month when I got home in 2021. I also came home injured, so that's a whole nother story. But I came home, and I committed to stay home for a month. I pretty much did, except for going to the store maybe twice. I said, I'm just going to force myself to endure the screaming and cries of kids, to endure the things that I've been running away from for almost 2 decades. I'm going to stay home, and I did. And I went and I watched the kids going through the program at Little Blessings. And I remember crying, seeing my kids, and then talking to the lady that was the, I don't even know what she was, but the psychoanalyst lady that's there for the program too, and telling me what the problems my kids were having and how this program was fixing my kids. That makes a dad feel pretty cruddy, but also happy. And saying the things that Natalie had went through and how this program, and then lights started to go off in my head, my PTSD, which for years and years and years I failed to admit that I had a problem, was actually creating a much larger problem with my own family. And then the Afghanistan pullout happened, which is a whole nother thing that as a vet, we went through some serious issues with. So how did I do that? I decided to build a war memorial at my office at Visiting Angel. So I just got a couple pictures here of a pad and a flagpole with an angel, and essentially I made a memorial for the global war on terrorism. May had a bronze plaque, and we had a big party for it. Oh, thank you. I guess I'm being told I need to take a drink.
It's just water.
It's just water. But it says, this flag and memorial site were built to honor the veterans of global war on terrorism. It is dedicated to all who served our great country and answered the call after the terrorist attack on September 11, 2001, to the defenders of freedom, those who never returned, and those who left a piece of themselves in the sandbox. Pick up your rucks and let's roll. We had a congressman there. We had plenty of people there for the ceremony, the VFW, etc. And then, well, that's a bad picture, but that's the entire thing. But I came home, I had a bad hip, I had surgery. I ended up going to France with my wife when I was assigned at the Soldier Recovery Unit down at Fort Belvoir for 2.5 years. We went overseas, I was on a cane. I was pretty crippled physically. I was jacked. And that's part of our story too, because I came back from from Iraq and Syria in 2015, broken. And then they put me in a Soldier Recovery Unit with a bunch of other broken people, which probably wasn't the best idea, but it allowed me a lot of time to think. Again, I was away from home, stuck down in Virginia, which was the first time, by the way, I ever went to a Mission barbecue, because they have them there, so this is a great place. I didn't know they existed until I went to Virginia. But my wife came and visited me a couple times. We went to France with the not wounded warrior, but the Soldier Recovery Unit, to a free trip to France. And then, I do a lot of speaking engagements. That's me, my chief shirt, my chief fuel cup. But anyway, so I am not recovered, obviously. You can tell that. But I have gone through a lot of things. And so I guess to get to the meat of everything is, as a reservist, I had a career, I had a job, I had a family, and then every few years I was ripped away from my family and sent overseas. First time, you don't want to go, but after that you want to keep going because you find comfort in what you're doing overseas. You find comfort in the chaos and when you almost get killed, there's nothing more exhilarating than that in life. There really isn't. And it's an addiction, it's an addictive feeling that you want to be there again, and then you lose buddies and you want to go back again. And so I had a career and I had a family, but my mission for the country became number one in my life. It got placed above everything else. And I think that's what a lot of vets go through, or a lot of people that serve go through. They are addicted to service. And maybe a little too much. But then you come home, and then home is not comfortable anymore. And you're not fitting in. You are now a square peg trying to be forced back into a round hole. And it just doesn't work without something being shaved down. And as veterans, we don't want to be shaved down, and we resist that. Regardless of how wonderful and loving our family is and our spouse is, as I can attest to, my spouse is an amazing, wonderful saint of a woman. And my kids were amazing kids, but they were kids. And that chaos I couldn't handle, but give me some danger and something crazy, which is probably why I was a lineman too, because I loved the adventurous atmosphere of it. But coming home was always hard. That was the hardest part, and refitting in. But I'm going to talk about Anna a little bit too. When I came back in 21, she was writing a book. And obviously I came back broken physically. I came back broken spiritually because we had went through probably our toughest, we can look back a lot of tough times. But, actively talking about I'm done, that's a big thing after being married for, 20 plus years. And so I came back, and Anna's working on a book. She's writing a book, and I tell people it's a book about a bad father. And my wife says it isn't. I said, what? If there wasn't a bad father, she would have never written that book. So it is. But she gave me the transcript or whatever, and I read through that. And I will tell you that nothing has helped me more in my recovery than reading a book written by your 14-year-old daughter about her perspective on how life was. And I had to remove a few lines out of her transcript for ease of reading. But to read what your daughter writes about you, and it's not good, that any kid should have to go through that. really is a wake-up call for me. And the first time I read it, I mean, yeah, definitely, I was very teared up. Every time I read a book, I get teared up. So that's, you know, I'm human, I guess, too, kind of. But I'm stuck in Virginia. My daughter's writing a book. My kids went through the program. My wife has gone through the program. They're involved with Little Blessings, helping other veterans. I'm getting kicked out of the Army because they don't want me anymore because I'm broken, which is a whole nother mental thing that you have to go through as a vet. And then I finally, you know, then I get elected to the State House, which is a whole nother weird story. But I did. I got elected. I was on active duty and got elected to the State House. I think it might be the only time it ever happened in Michigan history. And then I missed 6 months of my first session because I was stuck in Virginia, getting booted out of the Army. And then after I got out of the Army, I got my hip replaced, so I recommend it to anybody. Get a good hip replacement. You'll never regret it. But re-engaging with my family. And I look back at those times that, you know, there's so much of my life I miss, but also so much of my kids and my wife's life that they missed. But maybe it was for a good reason, you know, and I can justify that. But I remember coming home, every time I'd come home, we would have discussions. And I'd be, yeah, that was last year. Last year was always 2 years ago. Because there was a year or more of your life that was just non-existent at home. And that was very frustrating as a veteran coming home. Every time I'd come home, it'd be like, yeah, that was last year. And my wife would correct me, no, honey, that was 2 years ago. That wasn't last year. Remember, you were gone last year. But it's just like a dark period. And I will say that, you know, PTSD is not sometimes it can be a one-issue thing. Something happens, it snaps, and you're forever changed. And sometimes it's cumulative. So I go look back at my first tour, I came back. I thought I was okay, but I kept driving and driving. I came back in 2010 for my second tour. I thought I was okay, but I kept driving and driving. I came back from Afghanistan in 15. I couldn't drive through it anymore. I fell to pieces. And it was accumulative. I started having dreams again and nightmares and going through all the same things that I did in 2004. It was a cumulative effect that about destroyed me. And I thought I was going back in 2020 to get fixed. And really, in recollection, I kind of did get fixed a little bit because it brought me to a point, physically and mentally, to actually want to change and want to do the right thing. And so
I think my job is to fill in the holes. The part that he did not say, that he could not feel. And so as I follow up with the spouse support group at the equine therapy place that he mentioned, Little Blessings, Veteran Outreach, and I see spouses going through the same thing that I'm going through and did go through, and we hear the same stories. So I'm going to tell you that story. So when we started deployments, I thought that was the hard part, right? You know, your husband's gone for 18 months, all of a sudden the washer and the dryer breaks, the kids are crying all the time. The first time in 2003, he'd call every 2 weeks for 20 minutes, and most of it was crackling and breaking up, and your kids want to talk, so we really didn't talk much. There wasn't email, it was just a mess. And you think that was the hardest thing in my life, right? And then you find out later that wasn't the hardest thing. I'm sure you can relate, you know. So in 2015, jumping to that third deployment, he came home and I did not know what was going on. He seemed different, but it was just like, I don't get this. This is really weird. It's like he wants to be gone all the time. He's at work all the time, and then it spiraled. It spiraled. I started seeing there is something wrong. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong. And you know what he probably doesn't realize is that a lot of times I was getting suicidal texts late at night, and I would drive to the office and just look in the windows, make sure he's still alive, you know, stuff like that. He would come home, he was angry, something got dropped, the milk got spilled, he'd yell, and then he'd leave again, and the kids were crying and a mess. And so I was carrying all of this and figuring out, just thinking, I need to fix this, right? I need to keep all the kids together. I need to keep our family solvent. I need to be available for him, try to get him help. So I started with, okay, I'm going to research. What's wrong with this? So, you go on the internet, you start reading books, and okay, it's PTSD. So what can we do about this? And I worked and worked and worked, and this is very common. Most spouses do the same thing. They're like, what? We got to do something, or this is not working, okay? And I did not find the hope I needed. All I heard was, there's nothing you can do about it. There's no cure. So either live with it or leave him. And I didn't like that answer. There were not options. I was going to make it work if I possibly could. So I did what most spouses also do, and I said, okay, what can we do to fix this? So, well, there's this kind of therapy going on here, or this class, or we can go to this retreat together. And he's like, yeah, no. He was not all about that. We tried a couple things, and it kind of just went down the toilet. And then after a long time, I would say, started in 2015, but in the middle of 2018, I realized something was wrong with me. I was tanking. I think it's called residual PTSD. I think that's what was going on. The emotional turmoil, the heaviness, the darkness, the kids just falling apart. I just couldn't see hope anymore. And I realized, what? I'm going to put him aside for a minute, and I need to get help. So I started going to counseling, trying to get some help. And the first place wasn't real helpful. It was like, you need to forgive him. And I was like, well, okay, I forgive him. Now what? And so moving on, I had met Jamie Paxton. She's a veteran, and she's the one who started Little Blessings Veteran Outreach. It's an equine therapy program that aimed for veterans basically at the beginning. And I had reached out to her, said, I really need you to pray for our family. We're going through an awful time. Basically bawled on her shoulder the first time. The second time I called her, she said, you know what? I want you to go through the equine therapy program. It's 50 weeks. You go once a week for 50 weeks doing this equine therapy. And I said, that is not right. I know there's limited spots for the veterans. Why should I go to that? I don't want to take a spot from a veteran. She said, no, listen, you need to take it from me. You need to go. So I prayed about it for about 24 hours. I said, I have no answers here. I can't see how the horses can fix this, but I'm just going to try it. So I started going through that program before he deployed, but I didn't tell him. Partly because I didn't feel like he was all that interested in what was going on at home at that point. He had his own goals. We were not connecting well. And so I think a couple months in, we went on a little date, and I showed him my phone. I showed him a picture of me on a horse, and he said, what's that? What are you doing? And I said, well, I started the Little Blessings Equine Therapy Program. And he looked at me like a deer in the headlights, like, why? Why would you need to do that? I don't know. Jamie offered it to me. I'm just trying it. So that's one of my first sessions. That's Sebi. And the first 10 weeks are basically getting on a horse and regulating your emotions down, getting your nerves settled so that you can actually start the process of healing. And I'm not going to go through the whole program. There's a lot to it. There's different sessions. EMDR is included if you know what that is. But I started, and I was starting to get some healing finally. Healing, resilience, strength, boundaries. I was getting all these things. I was growing while he was gone. He deployed. This is all happening. Then they started a program for the kids, so our kids are involved. And then it comes to the conversation. halfway through his deployment, I finally got to the point where I said, you know what? My kids can't go through this anymore. And neither can I, it's not right. And up to that point, I think I thought, PTSD is terrible, it's an awful thing, there's nothing he can do about it. And then going through this program helped me to get to the point where I thought, well, I think it's time to put some boundaries up. And talking to Jamie Paxton has helped a lot. She's helped me to understand the veteran viewpoint, the struggles, what they go through. And she helped me to understand that veterans need some structure. They're used to structure. They're used to people telling them what to do. They like strength. And he responded well to the boundaries. I didn't say, you can't do this, this, this. I said, things are going to change. If you're going to continue doing this, I'm going to respond differently. And I never said the D word. I never said divorce. But he took it that way. He said, okay, I guess she means business. So those are some pictures of my going through the program. Following up, this is a spouse support group. This is every other Tuesday night we get together as spouses of the military people, and we do our own therapy. We work through life issues, finding solutions without talking. It's always working out a problem, and it'd be very hard for me to describe, but it is incredibly powerful. Here I am. She'll give us a scenario like, think of the thing that makes you most frustrated right now and build it. And now we have to take these objects and kind of build out our scenario of what we're struggling with. And then by the end, we need to make a step. How could you change this scenario that you put out there, change one thing to find a solution? So, I'm going through these things. I'm getting stronger. This is the military kids next. That's two of our kids. A very sweet picture. But they went through the military kids program and they got some tools. What do I do when Dad's mad? How do I recognize my emotions? What do I do about those emotions? There's Anna when she was a little girl. When she first started. We can go ahead. And there's Anna. She helps with the military kid program. It's once a week. She hasn't done it this session, but for years she's done that. She goes and helps with the military kid program. There she is. You can go ahead. Keep going to the end. And that's our Hancock. He's mowing at the ranch, little blessings, and he's stopping to talk to the horse. And there's another of that's Leland, our little boy. So to finish pulling this all together, do I believe that PTSD goes away? No, I don't. We struggle still with the same issues. We struggle. We have to come back to basics. We have to work through things. But Little Blessings gave us those tools to be able for me to understand him and for our family to heal so that we could keep it together. And it really was through God. Another thing is the book. I really wanted to tell people our story. I wanted people to see there is hope for this. That hope that I wasn't getting that picture when I was looking, but I wanted people to have hope. And there just wasn't the resources, and so, she wrote the book, but I tried first. I tried to write out the story, and I just couldn't put it into words, and I said, Anna, I want you to try. So she did an amazing job, and then she did watercolor illustrations for every page, and we went through the whole publishing process. So I don't know if this is helpful to you, but I do want you to know that there is always hope, always. I know a lot of you know military members, and you may not realize during the times that he was struggling the deepest, you would not have known it. He was a community leader, he was at community events, everybody thought he was wonderful, he was smiling and happy and outgoing. You would not have known it. And that person in your life may not show you that they're struggling, but I want to encourage you to reach out to them, be that friend, be the resource they need when they need it.
Anna, did you want to come up and talk at all? Are you sure? Okay, I'm getting the nod this way. But, all right, let me turn one of these off. Wow. State Rep, thank you. Well, I appreciate telling the story. I mean, first of all, big round of applause for getting up and for sharing on a very tough topic. I mean, obviously this is a lot of folks dealing with it. You heard a perspective of that. Invisible type of wounds that can happen in people's lives that impact them, their family, their children. So that being said, as we wrap up today, Anna, you're sitting back there right now, but she is going to come up here. If you are interested, she has copies of the book. And I'm guessing that if you come buy a book from her, that she'll probably even sign it? Probably? Okay, fantastic. But this tells the story through her eyes, once again, and you heard the powerful story and everything, so I would encourage you, if you want to come up and get a book and everything there, please do it. And once again, thank you for helping us. I know it's tough. Sometimes it's like ripping off a Band-Aid in front of folks and everything else, but by golly, it gives us an insight and hopefully a little bit deeper understanding, so thank you so much. And I know it seems like a weird gift to give after this talk and everything else, but I'm going to give him a big damn bullet engraved. Okay, so this is a 30 millimeter from an A-10 from the Air and Space Forces Association. That. But anyway, thank you so much. It's a good conversation starter. So.